Hi, I'm Jackson Lau. I had the privilege of being the church planting pastor in 1985 for our church.
I'm Maggie Ho. I attended the branch church since maybe 6 months after it started.
I'm Gordon Chow. I am member number 1 at FCBC Walnut, and I've been here since the very first service.
I'm Maureen. I started attending the FCBC St. Gabriel branch since 1986. And then I started working in the office in 93. And then later on became an office manager. So this is my 32nd year working here in FCBC.
Tell us about how did FCBC Walnut get started as a church plant?
We are a church plant of First Chinese Baptist Church, Los Angeles. And because First Chinese Baptist Church, Los Angeles was an immigrant church plant by the Southern Baptist Convention, we always had a heart for reaching out. So because of the Great Commission and based upon the fact that Jesus saw the church as his bride, we always were thinking about planting churches. So in 1985, Dr. Timothy Lin came and said, let's plant our next church. So that's how we started.
Was there a specific reason, and anybody can respond to Pastor Jackson, but was there a specific reason why you chose the East San Gabriel Valley at the time?
Well, I wasn't involved, but I understand that our church in LA did a study of the demographics in the San Gabriel Valley, and I think that's how the group got started.
It was both a study of the San Fernando Valley and the San Gabriel Valley. So based upon the survey by a committee led by Deacon Jensen Han, we guessed that the movement of the Chinese population would be eastward in the San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah. It turned out to be true.
We guessed right.
What led you to commit to the church plant? I mean, LA was a thriving church at the time. Mm-hmm. There was a lot going on. You lived out towards the west. What led you particularly to commit and say, I want to go with the branch, with the mission church?
Yeah, my husband and I, we actually live in Monterey Park. LA is only 6 miles away, and close enough. We were able to find parking space. But then when the church plant gets started, they need brothers and sisters over to serve. By that time, we moved to Duarte, and thinking that to serve, I think we are more geographically closer than, let's say, brothers and sisters live downtown or west side or San Fernando. So after the then church year stopped, we decided to come over and do whatever we can.
In the early years, what were some of the challenges? I imagine, there's maybe you guys could reminisce with each other about early on. I mean, you show up, you're member number 1, but yeah. We're meeting in a school, so maybe you could share about that. I mean, what were some of the major challenges, whether it be facility, finding a location, recruiting more people, any hurdles with the school district or the city? I mean, just some of any challenges.
I remember first having prayer meeting at the church fellowship hall, right? Remember that? Every Wednesday, Pastor Jackson, you have an office there. And that church has been right in Nogales, yeah. And I even remember one of our members pulled down the bookshelf. Remember that? and it was quite an interesting meeting, but it was a small meeting. We really get to know each other very well.
I recall, we've met at Mesa Robles School. It's a junior school, junior high here in Hacienda Heights. And like a typical church plant, we had to do everything. We were small at that time. I believe the first year, Pastor Jackson, maybe 70, 75 people, something like that. We had to bring everything every week. We had to tear down everything and take it home and store it. I think it would be very similar to our new church plant. They're going to face the same challenges. You don't have your own facility. You don't have storage. Yeah, and so people are going to have to, store all of the church supplies and equipment at their homes and bring it every week and, take it home. And so, there's just more time involved in setting up and taking down every week.
I just remember there's a very limited space for us to have Sunday school classes. And I remember there's one Sunday school class I went to was on the stage. Just form a circle and had a class on the auditorium stage. So that's one thing I remember. Another thing is there's always translation for the sermon because it's combined. Everyone, we were just having one service, So Alan Ken was the one.
Alan Ken translated into Mandarin, and Su Jin translated in Cantonese on the earphone.
So, where you feel comfortable with, but when you came, were you single at the time? Did you meet your husband?
Oh.
David? I'm trying to spice it up a little bit.
I think David started coming in '87, and he actually started. The reason why he started coming to our church was actually from the young adult fellowship back then. Back then we met in Whittier in one of LA Church's members' home. They were just very hospitable, allowing all the young adults to meet there. And back then it's all combined. There's no, English, Cantonese, Mandarin. We all met together. And I think David at the time was actually attending FCBC. Back then it's Westminster.
It's far from the alley now.
Right. And then Dr. Lam kind of introduced him to come to our church to attend the Friday night fellowship because back then he worked in Alhambra. So on his way home from work, he can, pass by Whittier. He lived in Orange County, so he started attending. That's how we met. Yeah. And of course, Pastor Jackson, a year later, Pastor Jackson officiated our wedding. And 30-some years later, Pastor Jackson again officiated our daughter's wedding.
My joy.
I still remember Maureen as a single young lady.
Oh, good.
Actually, Gordon also came from FCBC Fountain Valley.
Yeah, that's correct. At that time, we had just gotten married. We got married in 1984. And before we got married, Susan, my wife, was living with Katie, our children's director, and their brother Brian. They were at a condo in Garden Grove. And I had purchased a home here in Hacienda Heights. Back in those days, you could get a brand new home, $175,000. So I was living here, and after we got married, Susan moved in. And so we're living here in Hacienda Heights, and then we got word that there was a new church plant starting in Hacienda Heights, and so that's why we came the very first time. Yeah, because we originally started at, when I was dating her, I was attending a First Chinese Baptist in Westminster, which is now Fountain Valley.
Yeah.
I think of Mesa Robles. So you'll have to prompt it in to the conversation. But do you remember ever getting in trouble with the school district because some Sunday school student poured punch into a drawer and ruined the...
Was that you?
That was me. That was me and Adam Lee. That was me and Adam.
So we were in Mesa Robles for 8 years, and it was a blessing by God's provision because Mesa Robles is one of the few schools that had an auditorium that they also use as a cafeteria. Most of the other schools had a cafeteria that they used as an auditorium. And so the school district was willing to rent to us, great price. The auditorium was $10 an hour and each classroom was $5 an hour. Tremendous. Only thing was, the principal, the first time I met him, I introduced myself, he looked at me and he says, I don't want you here, but I have no choice. I said, wow, this is going to be a good beginning. So, but God had us there, and we were there. We were blessed by the facility for 8 years. And just to add something, one of my 12th grade Sunday school students later on became that principal's assistant principal.
Oh, wow. Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there were some challenges, right? In the summertime, if I recall, the Mesa Robles Middle School wasn't available, so we would the church would have to meet at Los Robles Elementary, about like 15 minutes, or you forgot?
Just a few times, yeah, just a few times. But the advantage also was there was a Chinese school that used Mesa Robles, and so we were able to reach out to the Chinese school. And the Chinese school loved the idea that they could give the kids to us for 3 hours every day, because they were, not only was it a Chinese school, it was a summer program activity. So that gave us an opportunity to reach out to community through the Chinese school. And that was God's provision.
And so from the time there at Mesa Robles, how did it grow?
In my thinking and reminiscing, looking back, you see God's hand in all of this, our growth that we have experienced all these years from our very faithful pastors, and how the Lord has always provided for our needs, whether it's financial, manpower, everywhere you look. Sometimes when you go through it, you don't realize it. I guess, reminiscing, if you want to go back, I remember our very first Thanksgiving, okay, how the church has grown. And one of the things I've always used to gauge church growth is how many turkeys we carved for Thanksgiving. Our very first Thanksgiving, we had 4 turkeys, okay, maybe for about 50 or 60 people, and they were cooked like a potluck style. Different people would cook the turkey and bring it, and all the trimmings. And I remember working in the kitchen that very first Thanksgiving. We also had the sticky rice, and so the sticky rice came in, but some of it was very professionally prepared, and some of it, let's just say, they did their best. And we had to try to divvy it up. It wasn't like this very professional production like what we have nowadays. And I remember one of the people brought in a plate of sushi. Can you believe that? And so we were there, we were thinking, well, it wouldn't be fair to just give this plate of sushi to one table. The other tables wouldn't like that. And so what I remember that first Thanksgiving is the plate of sushi stayed in the kitchen, and it was quite good. Yeah. And as part of hospitality, we used to have fresh cut flowers, and so that was one of the things we did every week. Before coming to church, we would drop by the nursery, pick up the flowers, for the altar flowers for that week, and place them on the altar. And then I was involved in treasury with Maggie, as a matter of fact, and Ed Lau. The 3 of us, we would count offering after service. And
on a card table.
Yeah, on a card table, a folding card table. We didn't have all the software. We were entering the offering manually back in those days because, they just didn't have the computers.
Right, and then later Gary also came.
Yeah.
Faithfully served together.
Yeah. Gary Wang.
And he's still there. He's a faithful member.
Yeah. Those are some of the people that have been serving in treasury
for a
long time.
And like Gordon was sharing, that people just stepped up and served. And so Gordon not only served as in the finance, but when we had our first VBS, Gordon had just started his accounting business. He took that week, the first half of the day, off to be in charge of transportation. He took care of the transportation, and he was willing to sacrifice starting up his own business in order to serve the Lord. And I think the Lord has blessed his business as a result of that. And I think that's a model that he exemplified to our congregation, to put the Lord first, and the Lord will bless.
Amen.
I want to move us over to 155 Fairway Drive. How did we get here? I imagine that the church had grown numerically. We needed space anyway. But how did we end up on this plot of land? And How did we get the first story, second story? To talk about the matching from LA, how we built the second story, and any details like that. How did we get here?
After 8 years, we felt that we needed our own home. And so we have been growing. I think we had been grown up to 250, maybe even 325 by the time we moved here. And but the mother church was also growing very fast. And of course, because they were mother church and bigger, they had more numerical growth. So there was a sense of where do we put our attention as a collective church. And so we didn't anticipate that we would be able to build either church without having to borrow in the millions of dollars from a bank. And so we just committed to the Lord. And one of the brothers from FCBC LA found this piece of land here where we are right now. And he said, though, the owner didn't want houses to be built around them, but they wouldn't mind having a church. So he negotiated with them. At that time, I didn't even know where Walnut was. All I knew was that Jimmy Lee and Jean had a house in Walnut, but I didn't know where Walnut was. So that's how Walter Pong, who is a member of our church in Sacramento, one of the church plants in Sacramento, he found the land, he negotiated, and we were able to purchase the 2 3/4 of the land at a very good price. It was a little bit over, 600,000?
Something.
Yeah. And then we put into the contract that the 1 3/4 acre that was left from the plot, that we would have the right of first refusal. And that became our extended parking lot.
Yes. Yes.
So since we got that land and we had a building project.
Yes. Maggie was on the building committee.
Yes, that was. There were actually 2 building projects, Mother Church and us, and there's
Yes.
a little difficulty. And I think, was that building committee covered the LA committee too, right? Steve Crowder was there.
Steve Crowder, Colin Chen.
Right. Paul Chang, Alan Cam. There's another major contribution.
Was Willie Wang?
No, not Willie. And then Willie Wang came afterwards.
Yeah.
And Alvin Ma.
Elman Wan. He did a lot of work
instrumental, yes,
from LA Church.
LA Church.
Yeah.
He is right in construction. He's a VP of Turner at that time.
So how do we raise the funds in order to build the first the initial building?
Well, as I recall, Mother Church allocates certain funds, and then, of course, members can contribute to it. And Steve Crowder actually is instrumental in doing this. As we contribute, we have a lot of offering from Mother Church. I don't even remember how. Somehow we got the architect, Carl Gady, right? And he had the plan, and I remember that's when I started to join the committee. Big learning experience for me. Very good. I think he specialized in church and nonprofit buildings, right? And I learned a lot from Alvin. I don't know about Alan Cam. He's all over the place.
So we had a pledge program.
Yeah.
And so at that time, we were still part of FCBC LA. In other words, all offerings went back to the one treasury, and they paid for all our expenses. So we were one church. So we operated as one church. But as part of our building program, we out here had a pledge program. We initiated a pledge program. And our people gave very sacrificially. And the mother church also participated. And some of the people there gave very sacrificially. So we raised money to build this church, but there was a misunderstanding. Our mother church thought that we were just building the first floor, and I don't know how that misunderstanding could have happened, because we're all very clear thinking and sure thinking people. But after we raised the money, he said, oh, we're just building the first floor. I said, if we build the first floor, within a couple, 2-3 years, we're going to outgrow it. And it's going to cost so much more to build the second floor, to bring a contractor to build the second floor. And so Mother Church, again, they had their building program. And they were growing tremendously. The Lord was blessing our Mother Church. And so they said to us, well, if you want to build a second floor, if you raise the money, you can build a second floor. And our people had reached deep into their pocket already, and the second floor would have been over $600,000 more.
Right.
So I went back to our people and said, you know, this is what the Mother Church says. We have to raise $600,000+ in order that we can build a second floor. So we dug deep into our pocket, but a member of our church in LA came up to me and said, Jackson, if you raise $1, I'll match $1. So our people dug very deeply. You know, they already sacrificially pledged. They even more committed, and we raised over $300,000.
Yeah.
And our sister from LA Church wrote a check, dollar for dollar match. Now this same sister, in the pledge, she had already given 5 figures. She is also the sister that bought the yellow
House.
and now the rainbow house,
Now the hope's there.
and said, this is adjacent property to the church.
Right.
Adjacent property is very hard to
There
find.
we go.
I bought it, and so when the church needs it, the church can have it. So I see that this is part of God's provision in a very concrete way. It was like, to me, it was like we were at the Red Sea, and we cannot go forward unless God performed a miracle. And to me, that was one concrete miracle that the Lord has performed for us. And I think that was very encouraging for our congregation.
I think our Mother Church policy is also very encouraging too. So you reminded me of that they will support us with all the expenses, and when we make offering, He'll set it aside as part of the church building committee for us. So that encourages us too.
What are, maybe share one, each of you can share the greatest challenge or most difficult situation that you can share, that's appropriate to share, that you remember that the Lord brought us over, you know?
I think for me, when Pastor Jackson first asked me, after we moved up, just right before we moved here in '93, whether I wanted to work part-time here to help out in the office. I think at the time, my second daughter was just born, just a few months old. But I was able to make arrangement and work here to start with part-time. So I remember I was the only admin staff or secretary here in the front office. There's just the big office space, just one desk there. And in the back, there were just Pastor Jackson and Pastor Joseph, you know. So at the time, I wasn't really too familiar with secretarial work. I think I just learned as I work. I learned how to type in Chinese, learn the different softwares. But yeah, gradually I picked up and was able to do whatever is necessary for the church. And later on, Helen came, and so that was good. So we can kind of share our workload and just to meet church's needs at a time, because we were really growing really fast. Yeah.
For me, without a doubt, the biggest challenge occurred when we lost a couple of pastoral staff. Pastor Jackson remembers. We lost them in a short period of time. In my mind, that was the real low point of the church. At that point, we really depended on God and to give us strength, give us wisdom and discernment how to move forward.
I don't know the behind the scene, but I was in the personnel committee at that time. And I remember a different pastor coming in, as we called him. How can we tell? Only the Lord knows whether that person is really called by God and called by God to our church. So we do our best. We had 3 and then 5 members, and then come back to 3. The best that we can do is to support the pastors from being able to supply and provide whatever they need. But we were put through a little bit too, possibly misunderstanding the pastor about our goals. So it took us quite a while to really, maybe by the policy that we adopted, that the pastor realized that we are there to serve and support them for their call, not so much not the typical HR pontificating of policy, no more supporting the pastor. So there was a big period of major policy adjustment to bring the policies of smaller Chinese church type to a structure that could be expanded, could be fit right in with the economy outside and comparable to some of the other company policies.
I think that was one of, if not the biggest challenge for our leadership. As we make decisions, I think it divided our people, and it caused some people to leave. And I appreciate the deacons allowing me to take some time. I think that helped. I went and did some personal retreats, and I refreshed, and I always come back, and I asked the Lord to allow me to rebuild our church and move forward and growing. And so ultimately, I think it was just God's grace. Just as it was God's grace to cause us to grow very rapidly, I think it's God's grace that in the midst of conflict, in the midst of challenges, in the midst of even leadership division, God was still faithful. And God allowed us to come out of that and be able to build again.
How has God grown us, not necessarily just numerically, but something that happened that was unexpected, or we talked about the most challenging time. What's something that you remember as something of great hope in terms of something you didn't expect that God would do? When you look back now and reminisce, you're like, that's amazing that God has brought us through that or provided this or that. Any memory or reflection?
One going really far back was that 3 months after we started our church, there was a shooting at FCBC LA that took our pastor in charge and took our head deacon. I truly believe that if we had not started, that we would not have planted our church given that crisis. I recall, for me personally, that was one of the most challenging Sunday mornings. The church in LA sent a choir to our worship every Sunday, and the choir came and they said there was a shooting at the LA church. I said, what happened? We don't know, we left. I said, how can you tell me there was a shooting at the LA church and don't you know? So I called down and I found out that the pastor was shot and the deacon was shot. The deacon was killed. The pastor was in critical conditions in the hospital. And I said, should I tell our people? Because that's my home church. I grew up there since I was a kid, and I wanted to be with our people. But we had worship. And I knew that if I announced it, we were not able to worship. So I preached. I don't remember what I preached. But I finished, and then I announced, and then we went back to the LA church. So that was very, very challenging for our LA church as well as our church. And together, again, I believe it's God's grace that allow us to, in the midst of conflict, in the midst of the unexpected, that God enter in and He walked with us through this valley and led us out of the valley. And both the Walnut Church and the LA Church grew. It took some time, but the people were committed and God was gracious.
I remember the preaching that Dr. Lin gave about martyrdom, actually. So not too many chances you would be able to hear something like that and can relate to actually something happening. So I was grateful for that. And then also seeing how the two ladies, and their testimony, that's great in that sense.
Yeah, for me, I think I reflect back again on the Bible and I guess 1 Corinthians 12 about the different parts of the body. And then also from Romans 12 about spiritual gifting, how it's also true here. You see it here at Walnut, how He put everything together from the very top to the very bottom. I mean, in 40 years, we've had 2 senior pastors, 2 very capable senior pastors. How many churches can say that? Down to, just the very little things. Maybe I can mention in the early years of the church, we had a brother here. His name was Alvin Liu. I don't know if he was autistic or what, but he was nonverbal. But he was so faithful, coming every single week to set up chairs for us. And God provided somebody like that. You talk about faithfulness. I watched him, and he was a definition of faithfulness. He didn't talk. My wife Susan called him my shadow because I was involved in setting up chairs and tables and taking them down. And I remember so many times, he would come and just tap me on the shoulder. I'd be having a table or carrying a table, and he would grab the other end, help me set up, and he'd want to know, did he set up the chairs right? Did he set up the tables right? That was his mission here, but God provided, such an individual. And like I said, from top to bottom, you just see God's hand on this church.
I think one thing I really appreciate this church ever since I started coming is how much we emphasize on learning God's Word. I came as a brand new believer, but I just remember Sunday school class is very much emphasized and in this church. And all the teachers had to go through the TTP program that Auntie Lily was leading for many, many years to train up our Sunday school teachers so that they can teach God's words faithfully. So I think that helped me, and I'm sure helped a lot of brothers and sisters to grow spiritually. And I think also for many years we were also very blessed by having Dr. Lin came here to teach us Sunday school, especially in the Mandarin Sunday school classes too. So we just very blessed and very appreciative of his teaching here, and he also has preached too. Although his accent, sometimes you have to take a little time and effort to figure it out, but we all learned a lot about him.
We have a joke on that. So Dr. Lin's English is highly accented. So people used to say, oh, it took me a year to understand Dr. Lin's English. So when we started Walnut, I said, Dr. Lin, now you could come and preach in Mandarin because LA Church is all Cantonese. So Dr. Lin, come and preach in Mandarin. And when he came and preached Mandarin, the Mandarin says, oh, his Mandarin is highly accented. It took us a year to understand his Mandarin. But it was a joy because the message came through, whether it's accented in English or Mandarin. And we heard God's word that touched our hearts.
Well, I think it's a blessing of this accent in different dialects and language. I remember talking with friends. It's a Shanghai accent Mandarin to a Chinese, a Cantonese English-speaking congregation in U.S. So it is quite an interesting service. And sometimes it's translated. I think Brother George Shan and Brother Alan and you later on translated.
Even many of Dr. Lin's books were translated too. So we all read his book, and I think Uncle George printed many copies and just pass it out for us to have to read. Yeah.
I want to recall another set of faithful brothers. We know we need deacons, and it took a long time. Then we have 7 deacon candidates. It took them a long time before they were ordained. We were all wondering why. So maybe Pastor Jackson and Deacon Gordon can share a little bit of that.
We're following the Bible. We tested them first.
It took them a long time. We all wonder. How many years have they been deacon candidates?
I don't recall now for Gordon.
Yeah, I think 2004 approximately, you asked me, and deacon candidate until about, I think 2010 is when we were ordained. So like 6 years. I think now the church has what we call fast track, huh? For these young guys, it's like 2 years. 2 years.
Yeah. I think one of our deacons in LA took 12 years.
But they were faithful brothers. We really appreciate them.
Winding down and just how did we get Pastor Albert? That's a miracle. How we got a senior pastor succession so smoothly. Someone's so coveted among the Asian and Chinese Heritage Church world. And we didn't really have to really search. And a lot of churches, they envy our process. How did that happen?
What a blessing. What a blessing to have Pastor Albert come in and be our senior pastor. Pastor Albert is from Malaysia originally, and he came here to Southern California to do continuous education at Talbot. And so when he was at Talbot, he ministered at FCBC Fountain Valley. And so after, I think about 5-6 years, he sensed the Lord's calling back to Singapore. And so we supported him as our missionary. And so because I went to Indonesia and some of our people travel, we kept in contact with him. And so we saw him quite often. And so he would come back, on the furlough every 3-4 years, and we would catch up with each other. And this is one of those times. And we were sitting in my office, and I was just sharing how I was hoping that in my early 60s, we can begin as a church to look for the next senior pastor. I feel that it is part of my responsibility for the church to bring in the next senior pastor with the church that is a reflection of our leadership when I'm not here. Who do we have to lead us into the next stage of our church growth and church journey? So I was just sitting down with Pastor Albert, and I was sharing, said, I'm praying that God would just send us one candidate. I don't want 10 candidates, don't want 2 candidates, just one candidate that when we present that name to the people, everybody would say yes, especially the pastoral staff. And so I just shared my heart with him, and he said, actually, but then he was the president of Singapore Bible College, and he He ultimately was a president for 7-8 years. And she said, oh, I'm thinking about that too. I'm thinking about preparing someone to take my place. And I said, what are you going to do after you finish? He said, well, it's been challenging, teaching in Singapore Bible College for 17, 18 years and the last 7 years as president. And it's been challenging and I'm a little bit tired. I think I would like to find a small church in a small town and be there. And I said, how about a small town like Walnut? And we just laughed because we said it half jokingly. At least I was half jokingly. But God opened a way. And within a year, he was ready to step in. And God also blessed him in that because he made a commitment before his term at Singapore Bible College. He was able to purchase his house in Eastvale the year before, and because the year after when he came, house prices had gone up. And who knew that God would plan for him to be our church plant in Eastvale area. So I guess this is God orchestrating. We get to be part of it and enjoy and see God's hand at work. And things happen in our lives. Sometimes we don't know why or all the details, but God unfolds, and this is one of those. So that the Lord brought in Pastor Albert, and it is true. Many churches would say, we were thinking about him. How did you beat us to it? So again, we say it is God's provision and God's grace that Pastor Albert has come and has been with us 10 years now. Yeah. Praise the Lord.
And can fit in so quickly, easily, with the FCBC little background. So, yeah.
And I remember after Pastor Albert bought a house in Eastvale, one Sunday after the memory service, he came out and he just kind of talked to me about, the housing in Eastvale. So he gave me the name of his street, right? Then I said, oh, that street name sounds very familiar. And then I realized it's just across the street from me, from my house. So we were like living that close to each other and saying, oh, I better behave myself. Pastor lives right across the street from me.
Any final reflections?
Well, two quick things. One is that one of my prayers was that the Lord would call some of the members of our church into ministry. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I see that accomplished in you, Hanley, and some of the others. Just recently, someone told me that, one of your former members did my mother's funeral service, and it's Eric Lowe. So what a blessing that the Lord has not only used the church and built it up, but it has called people from our church into ministry. And so for me, it's been a tremendous blessing to witness that, to see God's working in individual lives. Another instance that I always remember that blesses me was that we had one sister we used to have those who were joining a church give their testimony during prayer meeting. And we asked them, when you give your testimony in prayer meeting, invite your family so that they can hear, especially your non-Christian family. So one sister, she invited her sister. And when her sister came to hear the testimony, Helen asked her sister, do you know Jesus? If not, so Helen shared with her the gospel, and that night Alice Chin became a Christian. And now Alice is just an essential member of our church and leading our children's ministry. But that's how she came. She came just to listen to her sister's testimony, And when she came that night, Helen shared the gospel with her, and she was convicted and prayed to receive the Lord. And the rest of the story, you have witnessed, including you, Ray.
I see a lot of possibilities. Young people, I was the first one in my family to know the Lord, and then doing church is all new to me. But I see now with our young people and the church structure and so on is pretty well set. So I'm just praying that there are more opportunity for the young people to be trained to be able to operate and work within a church family. I recall and I appreciate the church training program that Mother Church had. It's not just preaching and so on, but doing different things. Remember those kind of things? Even like playing guitar, I remember doing that. And then later on, there's also a separate group of the teacher training program. So if we want the young people to participate, maybe we can continue to set up more opportunities for them to learn to be part of the church in different facets. So I think we have the resources as young people to do that, but maybe put that idea in them to set up those opportunities for the next generation to do. That would be my hope.